Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, and today we're going to do a little exploratory video on 32 Roadster that we bought in Auburn from the Early V8 Foundation. This again was a car that was consigned through the museum, and they were asked to sell it by the family of the gentleman that owned this last. So we thought it'd be pretty interesting to show a car like this that presents very well, and we thought it was kind of funny in the comments. People were losing their minds saying, with hot rodders buying this car, what are we going to do with it, blah, blah, blah. And we want to show a restored car is not an original car. It is a restored car, and we want to see how much has been done to this car, how clean or original is the car. We already know it's been repainted, and there's chips and dings and things on it, but there are some interesting things that we could show between original parts and repro parts that are good examples on this car. We're going to pull some panels out of the interior, and we can look behind the panels and see exactly how clean it is, what kind of patch panels have been done, and we can really get an idea of what's going on with this car and what sort of car they started with. So let's get started. All right, so we're going to start at the front of the car and walk our way through the back and kind of show a few of the things on this car before we pull some of the interior part. Things to look for if you're looking at a car and trying to figure out. We get a lot of questions from people when they're looking at 32s or even Model A's and different things of how do I tell if it's original or repro. From what I understand, this car was restored back in possibly the 80s. And then went through a couple of owners and was driven a bunch. So knowing that, we know that there wasn't as much reproduction parts out there back then, and there was a lot more original stuff floating around. So we'll start in front here and kind of work our way back. So first thing is, a big discussion is bumpers. So 32 bumpers, a lot of people are looking at 32 bumpers trying to figure out what's original and what is not. The big thing is you could stick your finger up in here, and the reproduction bumpers, they put like a washer inside of the bumper here that helps them, I think, when they roll the bumper around. And if you can fit your finger up in there and there's no washer in there, you pretty much, that's one of the big ways to tell. Also, the finish on the back of this is going to be a pretty rough cast, or not cast, but cast looking, if you will, but like the hot rolled metal, it'll have that textured finish. Sometimes there's some letters that are stamped in the back. Also, when the way they're rolled here, they're rolled like very tightly into themselves. The reproduction ones, they're not able to really do that. And you can see how this one's rolled really tightly into itself. I don't know if there's any reproductions that they're able to get that tight of a curl into the bumper. Sometimes you can tell by the curve of the bumper. They have like a slight arch to them the whole way. The reproductions are like really flat, and then at the ends they kind of like kink around. But really the biggest thing, if you care about having original bumpers, is the finish on the back. It won't be like a smooth finish with like almost like dull chrome. And the finger check is one of the easiest ones. You can stick your finger up there. If there's a washer that's welded inside of that, that's definitely a reproduction. And that's the way that I usually tell. So this car has both bumpers, from what I looked at, appeared to be original bumpers. I know some of this stuff that gets really nerdy, I don't really know off the top of my head, like with some of the bumper bolts and stuff like that, you can really get into it. One of the next things is, that's pretty interesting, not as far as reproduction goes, but on 32 they had the front license plate bracket has the hole actually punched in it for your hand crank to go through. If you want to hand crank this to start it, this actually has that in it, which is pretty darn cool, and that goes on, bounce right onto the spreader bar. On the headlight bars, they have like a stainless piece in the center here that's wrapped around, and a B model like this, a 4-cylinder, will not have a hole that's drilled in here. The V8s will, because there was a little V8 emblem that actually bolted in there. So on a B model, you're going to see that. So if you're looking at the swap meet and one doesn't have a hole here, it doesn't mean it's reproduction. It just means that it might be a B model bar originally on it. So the horn on the 32s, I think there might have been a couple different horns, but the one everybody calls like the 32 horn is like this boat tail one. The back of it pinches back like that, and that's one of the ways you can tell a 32 horn. They're kind of sought after, they're worth a couple bucks. Us hot rodders usually just sell them to the restoration guys because we pull a lot of that stuff off. But that is a neat little feature. Again, on the 32, there's so much stuff that's specific to just 32. It's good to see this stuff if you're out hunting for parts and looking around. So we'll open up the hood next and show you guys on this. All right, so under the hood on this car is obviously a 4-cylinder or B model. One thing that's interesting that actually fooled me when I first got in it was this has a cable that attaches to a knob to activate the starter here. So this is like your solenoid. And inside the car here, there is a little pull that is the start knob. So some of the other early Fords, like the V8s, they have like a push button or 33.4. There's on the floor a little button you push, and on this particular model, there is a pull there. One of the things is, although it looks a lot like a Model A engine, if you're just looking at it and don't know, the fuel pump mounting here is different. That's one quick way to tell a B model engine, with the number of bolts that are holding that on and how the water neck / water pump is done. Also, there's going to be a fuel pump actually on the engine here. So if you're looking for a 32 engine, you see a Boss here, even if the fuel pump isn't there, that'll tell you also that it is a B model engine. And they are far superior for sure than a Model A engine. Now, they also have these steady rod brackets that are bolted on. It's all 32 specific stuff. Has that stabilizer that goes on the firewall there. That's one way to tell if you're looking at a firewall and a swap meet or something. If it has that on it, you could tell. Not that it really matters if you're building a hot rod, but that's how you can tell that it was a B model firewall. So this thing, again, it was kind of a restoration, correct restoration, so most of the stuff in the engine bay is as it should be. Now, the one thing we ended up having to change, people were asking what was going on, why I had a charging draw, and basically the cutout on the generator. You can see we have a not correct one in here. It had a aftermarket one that actually has like a diode that's hidden in it, and it had a stock cover on it that was spot welded. Something went bad in that, and the diode was basically shorted out, and it was causing a 10 to 20 amp draw on the battery. Almost wrecked the battery. It was a brand new battery. It took me about 2 weeks of charging the battery on and off, doing slow charges and everything. Got it to the point now where it seems to start on its own finally again. Fingers crossed that it'll do it for us today. And we just got an aftermarket reproduction stock style cutout. Threw it on there, and it works just fine. We're not worried about getting judged for points. We still have the other one, but unfortunately they're out of stock everywhere for the diode type. So this one will do just fine. So the dual mount, side mount spares is kind of an unusual option. This has bracketry that actually bolts through the cowl here and then goes down. I think it's unusual on this car that it's a B model, but it has dual spares on it. And then also it's a deluxe, having the cowl lights on it and all these extra pieces. It seems unusual to me that this car would have been this way from the factory. I have a feeling that this is kind of a fantasy thing that somebody added. It may have been something that somebody added all these parts on, but to come from the factory with kind of like the base model engine and then get all these add-ons seems unlikely, but it does give it a fancier look, if you will, although I'm not really a total fan of it on a 32. It does give a little bit of a classier look like some of the higher-end cars, and it was an option. Has all the correct bracketry on there that goes through the cowl and holds it on. The hood here is a 20 louver hood. It appears to be an original hood right behind us. So if you look right here and take a mental picture of what this looks like in this area right in here, 20 louver hood. Behind you, Mike has a 25 louver hood, and you can see that it actually has additional louvers right in this area over the latch. So if you look here and then pan back over here, real quick way you can tell just visually looking at them. There are reproduction ones that you can get nerdy about. I think Root Lever, one of them, made a pretty close reproduction, but the louvers are opened a lot more on those. But this is just a standard 20 louver hood that came on 99.9% of it, but we thought it would be interesting to show you guys because we have a 25 louver right behind you. So the B model, basically all of the Fords, early V8 Fords era, I'm going to call Fords that had wire wheels starting with 32. Basically the size of the wheels went down each body style or series or year. So 32 had 18-inch wheels all around, no matter if it was a V8 or a 4-cylinder car. The hubcaps were a little different. Instead of having the V8 on it, the Ford ones have just the Ford logo with the 3 little rings around on it, but they all had 18-inch wheels on them. Then 33, 34 got 17s, and of course the coveted 35 Ford had 16-inch wheels but these always had 18s on them. That's what this car obviously has. It has the optional, or the option of the apple green wheels on it, on the dark green, which is a, you know, I think you could get basically any color wheel you wanted. But again, it has the cow lights, and has the wings there, and they have the correct marking on them. I doubt they're originals, but you could get a kit to put the stencil on there. So on the interior, the car is pretty darn clean. It has a wood grain dash in it. One thing we noticed, we'll have to get a shot of it and drop it in here, but I noticed when I was looking at the car, and we're going to take a couple panels off to show you guys, looking up underneath of this car, I actually think that this was a hot rod that was restored. So somebody wrecked, period correct, historic hot rod when they restored this car. They wrecked it, made it original again. I probably had the cowl vent filled and somebody welded in a functioning cowl vent. Not really mad about that because the cowl vent is very nice on a 32 Ford and any early V8 Ford, but there's some things like that. We noticed in the back that there was, on the tulip panel, when you crawl in the trunk, there was a gas filler neck that somebody welded up in there that would have been in a tulip panel like a lot of hot rods had. And then in the passenger quarter, the quarter seam original, there was 2 holes that were welded up like it had dual antennas in that quarter panel at some point. So a lot of those little things that you would have seen in a hot rod, you're seeing in this. But again, on the interior, it has you know, the wood grain dash on it, which is kind of cool. Because of the B model, again, it has the has that start pull there, and it has the dash light in the center, which is kind of 32 specific if you're nerdy about that stuff and trying to get that. It has all of that in it, and these are, I always thought this was cool on 32s, that the door itself has, in the inner structure, has a recess in it that has, that you can put this pocket to fit stuff in, which is really, really good. We showed in another video at that auction we went to, where when you have the door card off, you can actually tell by the stamping in the center on the Brookville doors, that stamping there's a little square where they stamped it that you can tell is much different than an original door. There's also some holes that are a little bit different. We'll try and drop that in a photo here. But the big thing is, if you look in that door there, see that little stamping mark? They like smash that flat in the factory when they stamp it. Looks totally different, doesn't have this hole. There's a bunch of stuff like that on the doors. The top on these cars I think is a little frumpy from the factory. We'll put the top up and show you guys what it looks like with the top up. And yeah, put this up. I'll probably need a hand.
Let's watch 2 hot rodders attempt to put up an original 32 top.
You gotta hold it on the bottom. It's a little stiff. I don't think you're supposed to.
Oh, is this latched here? That's why. Push down?
Oh yeah, my bad. Your side is latched.
No, yours is too. Isn't this piece right here? Look where my finger's at.
Oh,
Does
yeah.
that pull out somehow?
You're wrong. Yes, you pull. See, you pull on this.
Oh.
Jeez, I'm learning something today. There we go. Look at that. How to make your car look like an old man.
Push back a little bit.
You gotta unscrew your thing, possibly. Whoa. Nut threads in there.
There we go.
And then you can button everything down. But we're gonna leave it unbuttoned for now. But yeah, that's like, I mean, they're great looking cars, but that's pretty frumpy. I mean, it's like,
You can tell it spent most of its life down.
yeah.
It's very, I'll grab the camera here.
Yeah, it's a little shrunk in here, so it's probably been down majority of its life. But they did, I understand that the last person who owned this did tour with it quite a bit. This has these little original style buttons that you put in and they click and hold everything in place. We're not going to do that because I like the car with the top down, because not really a fan of the stock 32 or Model A even convertible roof shape. But These, when we were showing the DeLorean Roadster, it was one of the things that was really neat with it because it was a chopped and padded top from back in the day. A lot of times when they chop these, they would add an extra bow to kind of get the shape of the top a little better. So you can see these just have 2 bows underneath here. Yeah, you can see on the outside.
One here.
So they would have added an extra bow to kind of fill this area out on top of dropping it down. But you can see with this all together, again, it is a beautiful car, but Mike's smashing his head. It is a beautiful car, but with the top up, I think most of us could agree that it would have a better flow if it had a little bit better of a shape to it. But worked really well. You can fit your top hat when you're driving in it because it's very tall.
You might be able to.
Yeah, maybe not you. But you can see it has a little handles here, so rumble seat car. So you can sit in the back, put your mother-in-law back there, whatever. But it's got these little pads here for the top to sit on. It's got the handles to grab on too.
Is there a step on the other side?
The other side has the steps on it, yes. So you enter from passenger side, you got your step there, step on the fender, which terrifies me. Stepping on a fender is like,
especially on an early Ford car.
Brain can't compute. I'm like, why would I do that? And this fender actually has a split right here, probably from people stepping on the fender. That's a big reason why these fenders, they tend to split just because of the design, but stepping on this all the time and it being bolted there and bolted here and the pressure, a lot of times it breaks the bead here on this, and this one, or since being restored, has already had a little break in the fender here, but it's got the little handles on it, it's got the little pads that you put the top down and they sit on it there, and then you can of course roll this up and clip it so you can get some airflow through it, or you can talk to your friends that are sitting in the rumble seat.
You can even see a little bit of pitting in the gutters.
Yeah, you could see that there's some pitting. There's a little bit of welds in here where they like sliced it and welded in. This gutter was probably rotted out or needed to be modified. That side you could see there's a little weld in there. But I actually, when I'm looking at a car like this, I'm looking for pitting, to be honest, because early Fords really have never been worth enough money for somebody to take them to the level of like a Duesenberg or something like that, where they would put body filler in here and smooth out the pitting. So a lot of times when I look at stuff like that, like even that 25 louver hood when I bought it, it's really, really nice. And the only way I could be 100% sure that it was actually a real one and not a really good reproduction is I looked up in the edges where somebody couldn't get to put body filler, and you can see pitting. So that's how this is. It would be very hard to get in this gutter here and clean that all up. So it's good to see some of that, because you know the car, like if the gutters have pitting in them, that means that they haven't, this wasn't a car that was like made from 7 different cars and they pieced all kinds of reproduction stuff together. So that's actually good to see. But it's got its chips and dings and little things from opening and shutting.
For earlier, this is the tulip panel you're referring to.
Yeah, so right where Mike's hand was, there was a, right in there underneath, there is a hole that was cut in it and some damage and stuff that was repaired, but there was a hole over there for a filler neck. It's perfect size, super common when guys were building hot rods, they put a gas tank in here and they cut a hole in there. I try not to do that when I build cars, so I'm not a fan of it, but it's a telltale sign. And like I said, somewhere in the fender, roughly in here, there is 2 holes where there was like antennas that went up through. So this also has the luggage rack on it, which is highly sought after. If you're into these, luggage racks are for 32 is really sought after, and the spreader bar is actually very desirable because it has the little tabs on it that hold the luggage rack. So guys go nuts for those. Original ones are original luggage rack and spreader bars are very, very sought after. It's kind of silly, and I'm as bad with anybody else with this hobby, that it's literally 2 little tabs that are welded onto the bar, and it makes a difference between like a $700 to $1,000 spreader bar or like a $200 spreader bar. It's kind of
less than that actually.
Yeah, like a $100 spreader bar, $50 spreader bar. It's kind of crazy. So this has all those neat little features on it. Again, has an original rear bumper on it. Stick our finger up in there, and it's got the original rear bumper on it. I'm sure the gas tank has been replaced at some time, but what we're gonna do is put the top back down. I'll take off a kick panel and kind of show you guys what the back side of the panel looks like. I've already done this, so I'll show you again. It's pretty cool. Then yeah, we're gonna jump in it, take a drive, and show you what it's like to drive a bone stock 32 4-cylinder. All right, so we're gonna take this interior panel off to show you guys. This is if you're buying, you know, any old car, but it's, you know, especially an early Ford. I was a little scared when I bought this, a little uncomfortable because I spent some real money on it. And the one bad thing about buying nice cars is you can't tell what the heck is underneath all the interior. So, I mean, I guess you could tear a car all apart when you're interested in buying it. I did not do that. I felt a little uncomfortable asking to pull all the interior out and see, although they probably would have let me if I put it back together. But there's a lot of sins that can be hiding, like we've talked about. Mike saw, got you the shot of the cowl vent that was re-welded back in. They reversed the hot rodder modification, and also the stuff in the back, you know, that I found in the tulip panel. But one of the key places on early Fords that they rot is in the bottom. Every early Ford, especially Model A's and 32s, but pretty much all early Fords, that bottom body line bead at the bottom of the cowl is, like, for whatever reason, is the most common place where they rot. And that's one of the places that people foobar when they repair quite often, because a lot of times there's pop riveted patches and all kinds of scary stuff. So that was like, this was the first panel that I was pulling off. We probably should have just left it off, but we did not. So,
So from sitting here, you can actually see the inside of the firewall. You can see
the padding,
the pitting. Pitting, so you can tell.
Oh yeah, right in there. Yep. And I just sent all those screws across.
They're still all there.
Okay.
There's one is douche in there.
So in here, without ripping the floor mat totally worse than it's already been ripped before, you could see that this has not been patched. There's a little spot there where they might have did a little weld, but looking down in the sub rails, you can see how pitted that is there. You can see down into the bead, there's a lot of pitting in there. So that's a really good sign. I mean, to me, that shows me that somebody didn't do major patches, because the other work that's done on this car, that's another thing. If you do see repair work on a car like this, you can straight away tell the quality or the level of restoration that was done. And I'm not talking down on anyone that did this car, but the repair work that was done in the rear tulip panel, the wheel wells have been replaced, which we can get to then. I can tell the work that was done was not a super high quality. It wasn't gas welded and hammer welded totally flush and all of that. You can feel in the cowl there that it's not perfectly smooth. You can see that the welding was not, you know, the finish work was not done to a very high level. So what I'm getting at is this repair down here. We wouldn't see those type of repairs in the easy to get to spots, and then something here where it is, you know, they repaired it perfectly. So that's a good sign. Seeing all that, that tells us that whoever did this car originally, they started with a very, very clean car. All of the sub rails have a lot of pitting on the sub rails. The floors have been replaced. I can tell that for sure, which is a common thing. I mean, to have the floors rot, especially under the seat and stuff, but the sub rails do not look like they've ever been replaced. And seeing that is really, really good. All of this looks really good, seeing that there's some pitting, but it is not something that's all like modified or panels laid over top of each other and pop rivets. That's never good when you take this panel off and you see like filler sticking through or sheet metal screws and stuff like that, and then shiny on the outside. That's like a horror story. But it happens quite often with these cars, because if they were restored in the 70s and 80s and things, that's you know, a problem. But I could feel it's a little wavy in here, like right in here. It's a little low spot. It's pushed in, so there is some filler in the car, but we're not seeing anything that's like super, super scary, which is really, really good. But you could see some spots where they took the car apart, and there's some cut marks and stuff in here where they probably had this car all the way apart, but where it bolts together here, there's some, like, you can tell where they were cutting on it. And that's the type of stuff when the car's restored. Again, these aren't Duesenbergs. The car's gonna be restored pretty nice and present well, but it's almost never that you see it. I've almost never seen an early Ford that, like, stuff like that when you take it apart is that nice. I don't do that quality work. That's damn sure. But, you know, early Fords just never, I mean, a 32 Roadster when this car was done was at the height of probably with their value. But even then, people weren't doing, you know, a lot of average guys were doing the repairs and restorations. But overall, that's pretty much the best you can expect. I expect a cowl vent to have been filled at some point in its life. For a big part of history with these cars, people were filling the cowl vent hot rodders because they thought it looked better to smooth everything out. They also do rot in that area too, with the little like water trough there. They can get clogged up and it'll just have leaves and water sitting there, and then it will rot out. So it could have had that happen as well. We're not sure, but I think judging from all the other stuff, it was an old hot rod. All right, so that's a couple little details on this car. We're gonna put the hood down and take this thing for a ride. It's already been hot rodded though, because it's got a temperature gauge that's been added here. That's not original, and it's got this hood hold piece there. That's definitely a modern part. But put those down, take it for a drive, show you guys what it's like to drive a pretty much completely stock 4-cylinder 32. All right, so we'll show you starting up one of these cars. So obviously you either have the handbrake on or in neutral, or your foot on the clutch. And on this car, again, you use the start button is here instead of having a starter switch. On the 32 Fords, a little ignition switch here. This confuses people with early Fords a lot. Like friends that let drive the cars, have 50s cars and stuff. So all the key really does is locks the ignition column and it locks the off-on switch. And all the off-on switch does is give you your keyed on power, mainly gives you your ignition power. So you need to first flip this switch to on. I've already run the car because it hadn't been started in a while. I turned the choke on stuff. So then you just pull this little starter switch, so with it on, and it starts. So you can see we're charging here at idle. Battery is still a little hurt, so but it did start the car. It's been sitting for a week or two and it started right up, and we're pretty much good. So I'm gonna hop in the car, take it for a drive, might get some gas in it, because knowing me, I'll probably run out of fuel again if we don't stop. But we'll take you guys for a drive, show you what it's like to drive this totally original car.
Good, plenty of room, kind of hard.
Different than the dirt.
Yeah, can't see anything out of that. I've never ridden in a 32 Roadster.
No? All right, so this car definitely has highway gears in it, I can tell. I don't know if it's 320s or 350s, but the car has some kind of highway gears in it, because it's like, when you drive it, it goes a lot faster in the low gears. Like just driving around, I should already be in second, and then we can drive around in first.
Doing 20 in first gear.
In first gear, no way normally. We'd have to shift as soon as you pull out from the stop sign. Big jump there. You got to really, especially with the 4-cylinder. Especially in a 4-cylinder, it seems like you gotta get it tacked out a little more. I'm already worried we're running out of fuel. It might not be warm. It's not warmed up really either, but
you are prone to running things out of fuel.
It's just terrible.
As long as we make it up to the top of the hill at 562, we'll be okay. It's downhill to the gas station.
Yeah.
I can push it and stand on the luggage rack. Man, that jump.
Yeah, it's a big jump from first to second. And like third, it's almost stalling.
It just sounds like it just shut off.
Yeah, it definitely has some highway gears, which is really good, but in a 4-cylinder, you got to be careful, because the power to overcome, if you can't just lug it around town in third gear, that's for sure. But very quiet. This is unusual that we can have a conversation at a stoplight.
Yeah, I'm screaming at you normally. And it's only had, what, 14,000 miles?
14,000 miles.
Since 85?
And when it was inspected in New York, it had 14,012 miles as 82. So it has not been driven a lot since its last inspection.
What year was it? 2020?
2019, I believe.
Oh, yeah, wow.
So it has not been driven.
70 miles in 4 years.
Well, I think the gentleman who owned it passed away, and the family, either he had just had inspected, the family had inspected, but car runs good.
Still not warmed up.
No, it's not even, gauge isn't even moving, which is good. That's what we like to see, because that is our biggest worry in an early Ford.
Yeah.
Yeah, the jump from first to second is, but it's like worlds different driving this thing than a Model A. The steering is so much better. The gear is like,
it sounds like the engine just literally shuts off.
Yeah, it's because the RPMs are that low. It's like probably like 1,200 RPMs at 40 miles an hour. Which is good, because you could probably do like 80 in the damn thing.
We're gonna find out here in a second.
Maybe. You gotta get a really long, flat, straight road to get that, because
I've never felt this much cushion in one of your seats before.
This was...
It's so quiet, it's wild.
Yeah, the car does drive nicely, I will say that.
I think I can hear more tire noise right now than I can.
In the engine, yeah.
To the floor?
Yes, pretty much. Let's see if we can climb this hill and turn. Oh boy. It's actually doing all right. It's not too bad. I'm impressed because we were kind of dogging it in third there and it climbed the hill, so. I bet the carb is probably, you can feel it missing a little bit, but this car sat more than it really, this is probably the most it's driven on the open road in years, at least a couple years. Because I think the museum drove it around a little bit, but it was mainly just around the parking lot and things like that, so. Look at that, baby. Only car I have with a windshield wiper.
There's a first for everything.
We'll fix that. All right, so that was a successful drive as expected. We had a little hiccups with the carburetor when we were driving, but with this thing sitting for a while and having almost no mileage on it in 2-3 years, maybe more. But basically in like at least 2 years, it hasn't had almost any mileage really put on it. But the car did very, very well. It's very unusual for us driving a car that is A, so quiet, B, is like floating all over the place because the suspension's so like soft and high up. But yeah, it was really nice to drive. The 4-cylinder, I've driven in some cars that were hopped up 4-cylinders. I don't know if I've ever driven in a stock B model. It was definitely a lot better than a Model A. It is driving this car versus a stock Model A is definitely, you could see why this car changed you know, everything for Ford essentially when they got to this car. Even with the 4-cylinder, it just drives so much nicer. So it really was a pleasure to drive. Having the little bit better gears in the back was really nice too, because the car, we were doing 55 miles an hour with the 4-banger, and we weren't even really that high of an RPM. It did really, really well. And yeah, so successful little drive. Hopefully a couple little tips we gave you along the way for identifying some stuff is helpful to you. Now we're gonna make a decision what we're gonna do with this car. We'll shoot some videos coming up soon, but we are potentially gonna return this thing to its former glory of being a hot rod. I think so. We'll show you guys in the upcoming videos. So thank you guys for following. Appreciate it. Catch you later.